Good morning. So I'm Peter Wheeler. I'm with the Nature Conservancy. I was not indeed at Goldman Sachs for 25 years. I was at Goldman Sachs for 16 years, but I did spend 27 of the last 37 years since I left this august institution as a literature graduate working on Wall Street, and I spent the other 10 years working on my atonement. My last science class was a chemistry revision class before my O-level in 1972. But then we can look on the bright side. I've never taken an economics class. And while I'm a banker, I have to say I much more enjoy working with scientists than I do with economists, although I don't say that when I'm at the LSE. Now, is that? Yes. So this is a picture taken last week in the garden of Balliol. I was lucky enough to have dinner twice in a week at Balliol. The last time was 1978. The gentleman on the right is Tasso Leventis, and the lady in the background you will recognize as EJ, who is the Mona Gullard, who is the Leventis professor of biodiversity. The gentleman on the left is a board member of the Nature Conservancy. He's Roy Vagelos. He's also Greek, as it happens. You'll notice that neither of them are young. Roy is on the board of the Nature Conservancy. He himself was a research scientist. He ran research at Merck, the pharmaceutical company, in the 80s, went on to become CEO, was forced to be retired at the age of 65, and subsequently set up $2 billion biotechnology companies. You can see why we want him on our board. And the cause of this nice event at Balliol was Achim Steiner, the new director of the Oxford Martin School, very kindly hosted dinner to celebrate a science partnership between the Nature Conservancy and the Oxford Martin School. Strewn around this garden, you would have spotted, if I had panned my camera back, Freddie Otto, Yovinda Mali, David Wallen, Dan Mitchell, and others, and of course Miles Allen somewhere. So a great group getting together. Jane talked about two ways that the finance industry and climate change science come together. One is regulation, and the other was portfolio theory and portfolio approach. I'm going to talk about two others. One is playing nice, and one is playing not so nice. Let me get on with that. One last plug for the Nature Conservancy. We are 600 scientists. We use our science to deliver three ways. One is it informs conservation practice, as you probably guess. We protect lands and oceans and rivers. Secondly, it informs policy. We, like many of you, were on the road from Rio to Kyoto to Copenhagen to Doha to Lima to Paris, and will be in Marrakesh. Thirdly, it informs corporate engagement, and that's what I want to talk about now. Most finance, you'll note that this, sorry, I haven't got the right slide up high. You'll note that this, I had to cite a research work. This work, which was done by, among others, our own Jen Molnar, who runs the Centre for Conservation Science at the Nature Conservancy, you'll note focuses on Dow Chemical Company and their work on planning their ecosystem service values. When we talk about finance in the context of climate change, it's very important to remember the word finance can mean different things. It can mean finance as transfers from north to south by governmental authorities. It can mean finance as in capital markets, and it can mean finance as internally generated finance by companies. Most companies these days large companies don't have to raise a lot of external finance. They generate profits. In fact, they've never generated more profits. More US GDP is accounted for today by profits generated by companies than at any time since the robber barons ruled the world. And you may think that there could be a correlation between GDP and damage, and many profits generated by companies depend upon access to unpriced natural resources, what we call externalities. So I'm going to leave this. Peter Creever, some of you will know, Charles Godfrey certainly knows, was our chief scientist. He used to say, one of the reasons I like you finance guys is you kind of do the same thing as we scientists do. You kind of have a hypothesis and then you go out and test it. You don't test it in the forests and coral reefs, you test it in the markets. And that indeed is what we do. And so that's what I want to draw that connection. Let's talk about money. In the 1930s, this gentleman, Willie Sutton, was caught by the FBI after he'd robbed about 10 banks, and they said, "Why'd you rob banks, Willie?" And his answer to that question was, "That's where the money is."
This is an important chart. This is where the money is. And you'll note that BlackRock, as the world's largest fund manager, has more than $4.5 trillion under management. Industrial Commercial Bank of China, JP Morgan, Allianz Group. Those small amounts of money at the bottom of the chart there is the TNC and Endowment. We're quite proud of it. We think we're a very large conservation organisation. $2 billion, you can barely see it. The Wellcome Trust, you could barely see it. And even the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you could barely see it. When BlackRock published their climate change investment paper, the equivalent of the Mercer paper from last year, just a couple of weeks ago, the FT covered it in their leader. It said it's one thing when a philanthropic fund with assets of a few $100 million takes a stand on climate issues, quite another when the warnings come from a company with about 4.9 trillion under management. Enough governments and businesses are convinced by the scientific consensus that the threat is real and driving regulatory and technological changes that are reshaping the investment landscape. You may not be interested in the climate, but you can be sure that the climate is interested in you. We are at a watershed. I'm going to talk briefly about the green bond market. This is a new issue market of bonds by companies and governments that have a green purpose. Here are some of the things that you can do with green bonds. It's an interesting list. It's not that smart. It doesn't use enough science. It's about inputs, not outputs. You'll note that natural capital solutions, forests and grasslands and so on, aren't even there at all. A number of intermediaries and advisors like Mercer are sponsors here. Cicero, Moody's, Barclays, MSCI, PwC, De Norske Veritas are all involved in commenting and trying to improve the way the green bond market works. But we're very glad we have the green bond market because the very presence of this market, imperfect though it is, takes the debate about what is good climate science and what are the likely trajectories for global warming out of the scientific community and into the mainstream capital markets, however imperfectly that's done. A couple of book recommendations here. If you want to read one book about investment, please read Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, Fooled by Randomness. You may have read The Black Swan. This is much better. It was his first book. Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short, Inside the Doomsday Machine. Well, we're talking about a doomsday machine here. The important thing about Michael Lewis's book is the US subprime debt market was a market where you saw the true creativity of Wall Street and the city, where they came up with a solution to a problem that didn't exist, which was how do you lend money to somebody who can't pay you back in the US mortgage market. That went an awful long way before it all blew up and created the global financial crisis of 2008. But the point there is that it's the creativity as much as the access to capital that is important when we're looking at Wall Street. I don't know if anybody knows who these two gentlemen are. The gentleman on the right, you might recognize, that's Michael Bloomberg. Oh, I'm sorry. This is my book recommendation, Fooled by Randomness, Nicholas Taleb. And this is The Big Short, Michael Lewis, Inside the Doomsday Machine. These two gentlemen, Myron Scholes, economist, Nobel Prize winner, worked with a guy called John Merriweather at Salomon Brothers in the 1980s. He also worked with Michael Bloomberg. Long-term capital management formed by Myron Scholes, John Merriweather, went bust in 98, just before the Russian crisis. That was because the financial theory didn't really stack up. There was an idea that option pricing was based on a random walk model, a normal distribution of risk. In fact, they found out there are things called fat tails, which brought down LTCM. Michael Bloomberg, of course, has gone on to lead the task force. So it's interesting where the Salomon Brothers bond desk circa 1984 has ended up. And this is another third book recommendation, When Genius Failed. Oh, sorry. This is the third book recommendation written about that event, When Genius Failed. So I'm going to finish with one suggestion, which is that the financial markets the players in the financial markets are desperate for what it is that we all have in this room. They don't know the type of stuff that's been talked about over the last couple of days. However, it is a solution-oriented environment. There are some very smart people there. They come up with solutions to problems that don't exist. We need them to help us come up with the solutions to the problem that do exist. And that's, of course, the problem we're talking about today, how we get to 1.5 degrees. The other thing I would say, I think critically important, is that the financial markets do not work to a scientific standard of accuracy and perfection. You do not have to have peer-reviewed science to get the financial markets to work on it. It just has to be good enough. They are pragmatic. If it's good enough, the green bond market is good enough, it will get out there, the ideas will get into the mainstream system, and the markets will help you take those ideas and bring them into pragmatic solutions against the climate change challenge. Thanks.